draft grades. The Eagles had a pretty good draft, I think. A lot of people gave them an A- or a solid A. If you can see on our screen here, you're seeing the 5 players they drafted: Jordan Davis, Cam Jurgens, Nakobe Dean, and a couple others. Pretty darn good, Dave.
So far, so good. I mean, I honestly reserve judgment always until I see them in Philadelphia, in pads, against men. I mean, these are young guys going into a league of men. But for sure, my draft experience was really a fun one. Chet, I went to the Vegas for the first round, met Jordan Davis right after he was selected. Really
big guy.
There are only a couple of men that I've kind of done double takes, and it was Reggie White. Jordan Mailata is certainly one of them. Sean Andrews at the time was a big guy. Jordan Davis is right up there. I mean, he's a massive, massive young man with a great personality. And then a few moments later, learning that we made the trade to get A.J. Brown, made that first night a rousing success. And one thing I think that's cool about the grades is that this is my 25th year with the team. I can't remember an off season, and certainly a draft weekend, that has been so universally accepted from the media, from the fans. The grades are all terrific, and we'll see how they develop. Now the next phase is, how do they adjust to the bright lights, the big city, the tempo, and players who are equally talented and much more experienced and skilled in the technique of the NFL.
Bill?
Well, Dave, I'm like you. I don't get too excited about winning games in April. You got to win games in the fall.
That's right.
But I'll tell you what, this draft has me pretty excited, and the A.J. Brown trade is the cherry on top. To me, that was the steal of the draft by the Eagles to put them over the top.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably, Bill, and we all do, you put the whole offseason in context. And I know how fans are early in free agency when you're not coming out of the gate signing a bunch of players. The fans kind of go, oh, my gosh, what are you doing? You're missing all these quality players. But to get somebody like A.J. Brown, it really does. It means that you acquire a wide receiver who doesn't have that learning curve that you worry so much about, young receivers learning their way in the NFL. A.J.'s already done it. He's been a Pro Bowler. He fits into this offense perfectly. He has a relationship with the quarterback already. The Eagles already have one dynamic wide receiver in Devontae Smith. So A.J. Brown comes in and adds another piece. And again, when I step back and look at this Eagles offense, and I'll tell you this on paper right now, just from a talent standpoint, and you guys can correct me. You've been around for a couple of years too. I can't remember a more talented duo at wide receiver. Certainly Jeremy Maclin and Deshaun Jackson were good. T.O. was T.O., but he never really had that second guy. I guess I kind of have to go all the way back to Quick and Carmichael, and just in terms of pure talent at the starting wide receiver positions. And I just think when you can put that on top of a great offensive line and a tight end who's really good and running backs who are deep, this offense has a chance to be dynamic, and defenses are going to have a lot to handle starting in September.
And speaking of defense, the Eagles defense got an upgrade with the addition of Hassan Reddick and Nakobe Dean falling to the 3rd round. You got to love the fact that they got Nakobe Dean in round 3.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I was in Vegas for the first night of the draft, came back on a red eye, arrived back on Friday morning. And that Friday night was really interesting. So was in the draft room for the first pick, Cam Jurgens. And, they were going back and forth. Was it going to be Jurgens? Was it going to be Dean? Hush conversations, whispers. So they go with Jurgens at 51. And then they come back in round 3 at 83 overall, and Dean's still on the board. And, I mean, the defensive coaches were ecstatic to get Nakobe Dean. Now, why did he fall? Okay, there's obvious reasons. He had some medical red flags. Nothing that ever kept him off the field at Georgia.
Right.
But when teams look, and they all share the information. One of the things that I found really interesting was it wasn't like the Eagles said, hey, this is what we saw, and other teams said, oh, you missed that. Here's what we saw. No, they all have the same. 10 teams share that information, and it's just how you kind of extrapolate the information. And so the Eagles saw a player who's extremely productive. Nakobe's not the biggest guy in the world. He's about 5'11", 225. He can be reckless at times. That's what makes him great. And maybe there are teams that were concerned that he would not last long in the NFL. Eagles roll the dice here. They get themselves an incredible leader, incredibly productive, high motor, physical player. Is just, for years we've all said, well, why don't the Eagles invest first-round pick at the linebacker position? Well, in Nakobe, they really got a player with first-round skills, somebody who most people thought was going to go in round 1, happened to last till round 3, and really complements what they did in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dave, with the signing of Hassan Reddick as well, and Dean and Kyron Johnson with the next or later pick in round 6, do you see a lean towards maybe going towards a 3-4 defense, or at least mixing it up a little bit to change some things up on the defensive side?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think that's going to be part of the mystery of what the Eagles are going to do defensively. I think they now have the flexibility to do that. They've got the personnel that they can play in a 4-3. They can move to a three-man front. They're going to have to figure out a way to get Hassan Reddick from a stand-up position into the backfield. That's something they didn't do really last year from the strong side linebacker position. So, yeah, I do. I think that they will offer a lot of different looks and try to attack weaknesses. And, a defense that last year wasn't aggressive and didn't really play downhill, I think that they can play downhill this year, especially now that you had Bradbury. You've got a lot more confidence in your coverage on the back end. So I do think that's going to happen. To what degree, I don't know, and I'm kind of guessing because I haven't seen it. But I do think that they have that ability to mix and match their personnel with some different fronts and really try to keep offenses off balance, and that's the key in the NFL.
You mentioned Hassan Reddick. He's a defensive end, linebacker, can play both, depending on, I guess, whether it's 4-3, 3-4. He's a great addition. Plus, you got Brandon Graham coming back, hopefully healthy.
Yeah, well, Brandon's in the office every day. He's a ball of energy. He's a positive guy. We all love him, and we're hopeful that he comes back and that Achilles tendon doesn't drag him down. We don't know that yet. He's made a really good recovery. He's doing everything on the field right now that everybody else is doing, so that's a positive sign. I think we all would agree that Brandon is a rare treat, a rare treasure in the city of Philadelphia, in this region. So having him come back and have a strong season would be outstanding. And then, look, I know how Eagles fans feel about Derek Barnett, right? He hasn't really been as productive as you would have hoped a first-round draft pick would be. But now he comes back and he's able to rotate with Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat. They can bring in a bunch of players for rotations and keep everybody fresh. And if Derek Barnett is your third or fourth defensive end, that is a great rotation that teams really don't have in the NFL. We've got a 17-game season again. It's going to require a lot of depth, and I think that's what Brandon Graham gives you, and Derek Barnett gives you. He gives you a lot of depth.
Well, Dave, the Eagles take a defensive tackle with the first pick, an offensive center with the second pick. Typical to build from the trenches on out. This seems to be Howie Roseman's MO. Any surprises there for you? Did the Juergens pick really throw you off? And how's he going to fit into what I think is one of the very top offensive lines in the football league?
So, again, I was in the room when they picked him, and then I went into the offensive line room with Stout and the assistant offensive line coach, Roy Istvan, and they started running some film and explaining to me, and they raved about him. And really, if you kind of took his jersey off and put Kelsey's jersey 62 on, you'd look at it and say, wow, that's kind of the same player in a sense of they're super athletic. They get down the field. They play hard on every snap. I asked Stoutland, I'm like, well, he goes, David, he plays hard on every snap. He plays through the whistle on every snap. And I'm like, well, Stout, doesn't everybody do that? He goes, he looks at me like I had never watched a game of football before. And true story. And he goes, no, they don't play like that. And so things, that kind of competitive nature, that kind of love for the game of football, the athletic skills, the intelligence, the toughness. I'll tell you one thing about this team. They're not a bunch of pushovers. They're going to be a physical, nasty team. I think that's what Nick wants. Nick is that kind of guy, that kind of coach, and Juergens exemplifies that. Now, what kind of impact will he have in his rookie season? I think that they'll cross-train him at guard. We didn't think that Landon Dickerson would play last year. If we talked about this 12 months ago, Landon Dickerson would have been a redshirt offensive lineman in his rookie season. Turned out that he was a starter and a really good one once Brandon Brooks went down. So I'm very high on Cam Jurgens, very high. And I think not only for this year, but for next year and many years to come. And the Eagles, I trust Jeff Stoutland implicitly. I know that Eagles fans were kind of going, what in the world are you doing? We need a cornerback. Where are the cornerbacks? That's why it's the fun of being a fan is that you have hot takes. But the reality is, as a team, you kind of have to plan it out. And the Eagles really planned it out, knowing that Bradbury would be free, hoping that they could strike a deal with him. And at that point, in the second round of the draft, I'm glad they stuck with their board. I've been there too many times when they reached for a position and it didn't work out. And I think in this instance, everybody loved Cam Jurgens.
Hey, Dave, you mentioned cornerbacks, and there's a guy here tonight who was a pretty good cornerback not too long ago. Troy Vincent with the Eagles in the late 90s, early 2000s. What are your memories of Troy?
And you say not too long ago. What was that, 15 years ago?
Come on,
20
I'm
years
old.
ago. Yeah, me
Doesn't
too.
seem that long ago.
Me too. Oh, Troy's my man. I mean, look, he was really instrumental in what the Eagles were doing in the 90s with Ray Rhodes, building that defense. Great technician. I love guys who come back to Philadelphia and make a difference and stay here. And of all the players that I've ever interviewed, Troy's my number one. And he and I would just sit and talk for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Brilliant guy, loved his perspective. Thrilled that he is such an important part of the NFL at the executive level. Roger Goodell's guy, and is here tonight, for a very important cause, Women Against Abuse. And, the Dish It Up event, to know that Troy made the trip from New York, that this is so important to him, just shows what kind of man he is. Honestly, to me, Troy Vincent's like the kind of guy who you go, he would be a great president of the United States, in addition to being a tough, physical, competitive cornerback. There aren't a lot of guys like Troy then and certainly now who were so willing to be physical. I mean, I have the highest respect for Troy. Was thrilled that he went into the Eagles Hall of Fame, and think he's one of the greatest cornerbacks in the history of our franchise.
Hey, Dave, last week the Eagles' schedule for 2022 came out. That's always a big night for football fans. And, I don't get it. Vegas still has the Eagles at 8.5. Are we being crazy to think 10, 11, 12, 13 wins?
Chet, I like your optimism a lot. I don't know. I stay away from Vegas. I know I stay away from Vegas. It's scary, right? Like, now I don't know if that number was put out before the draft, or is that still the number? It
hasn't changed yet.
Does the number would it change?
I would think it would be at least 9.5 now.
So I mean, look, a line is put out there so people bet on it to draw the most interest. I certainly look and see more than 8.5 wins on that schedule. I mean, the way it opens up. Detroit on the road, and Minnesota at home, and Washington.
4-0 start, Dave.
Yeah,
4-0.
Jackson. I mean, why not 5? You're not getting DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona.
Yeah.
So, and then the Cowboys come here, and I love the schedule. I think the Eagles, again, by getting somebody like A.J. Brown, he's a plug-and-play wide receiver. You don't have to go, all right, well, he'll be ready. All that talk about getting Jameson Williams. And I mean, look, the Lions got Jameson Williams. Eagles don't have to worry about him, right? So, I just think it's a good schedule. It falls really nicely. I like 5 primetime games. I like Christmas Eve in Dallas. The last time the Eagles were in Dallas, my family went to me. Jeff Garcia went with me. Jeff Garcia had the big win for the Eagles. He wished everybody a Merry Christmas. He kind of that drive for the playoffs that year. I feel like over at NovaCare, there's just a lot of really great positive momentum, and let's just stay healthy and see what this team can become, because in a matter of just a few weeks here, they have upgraded so significantly with their talent level. Today, bringing in Bradbury, it makes you feel like, wow, this defense really can be a lot better than it was last year.
Yeah.
And the offense, I think, can be one of the best in the league. If it's obvious, I think let's be honest here. Maybe that 8.5 is this. They don't believe in Jalen Hurts. How about that? Maybe Vegas just doesn't believe in Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Hurts.
Because it does come down to him, right? It comes down to the quarterback, because all the other pieces are in place offensively, and it's going to be now how do the Eagles scheme for Jalen to have success, and then how does he respond? He's going to have plenty of options to throw the football to.